You're watching TelecomTV Spotlight on 5G series. It's Wednesday, the 23rd of February, and this is The Slice. Hello, I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content for TelecomTV, and welcome to the second of our news analysis programs in the lead-up to the MWC 22 event in Barcelona. We have three programs for you this week ahead of our daily live show, which we will be broadcasting throughout the MWC event. And joining me on The Slice is my colleague Ray Le Maistre, Editorial Director for TelecomTV. And Ray, how's your diary looking for Barcelona?
Well, Guy, it's fair to say I have a full dance card. I'm glad I booked those restaurants early. Oh, you mean for work? Oh, yes. From Sunday through to Thursday, it's a whirlwind, including interviews with top executives from Deutsche Telekom, Orange, Verizon, BT, and many more. I just hope there's some decent coffee to hand.
And whilst you're over there in person, I'll be keeping an eye on the news from the comfort of our UK studios with a freshly pulled espresso, of course. Now, 5 days to go, and there is a steady stream of MWC-related news reaching our news desk. On Monday's programme, we heard from Ericsson and Deutsche Telekom. Another of the major MWC participants is Intel, and it set the scene for its Edge and vRAN activities during last week's Company Investor Day.
Our focus here is on the Tier 1 global communication service providers and the equipment vendors who sell to them. Now, the team is leading the first wave of 5G core network deployments, and they're demonstrating that 5G base stations can be almost entirely built from software running on Xeon processors with vRAN. Understandably, a lot of people questioned whether you could really build a 5G network at scale at the highest performance from a software infrastructure. Surely it would run slower and it would consume more power. Well, it turns out they were wrong. Rakuten's virtualized network is built on Intel Xeon processors running our FlexRAN software. And 5 or 10 years ago, no one would have predicted that the biggest mobile networks in the world would be software-defined. It's really quite staggering. And now the last piece of the network, the RAN, is moving to software too. And this is a recurring story, with workloads moving more to software away from fixed function hardware. It's driven by the need for flexibility, programmability, and versatility.
Ray, Nick McEwen was positioning its network and edge business squarely between data center customers and enterprise and private networks, the edge to cloud strategy, with a huge bet on vRAN.
Yeah, this has been a focus of Intel's for a few years now. It's hard to imagine it won't pay off. I mean, we're still in the early days of vRAN, and there's a lot of growth to come as 5G network architectures evolve towards distributed cloud-native platforms. And already there are multiple options for many elements used in virtual RAN deployments, except when it comes to the processors that power the foundational hardware. That is Intel territory, at least for now. So it'll want to cement that position and do everything it can to hold on to it. And McEwen is a very powerful name to have behind that strategy. In time, of course, the industry will want an alternative, but right now Intel is the vRAN kingpin when it comes to the processing power.
Indeed, thanks Ray. And Intel has promised new products and architectural approaches ahead of MWC, maybe as soon as later today, so we shall watch out for those. Whilst there have been a few online video conferences and briefings, most pre-MWC media activity has been via the distinctly old-fashioned press release. Shocker. Singtel has launched Paragon, an orchestration platform for 5G edge computing and cloud services, which it says reduces the complexity and time needed to adopt 5G MEC and low latency applications. And Mobile Edge X has today announced a new version of its Edge Cloud platform, which introduces federation between any standards-based MEC platform. This will also allow edge application developers to write once, deploy everywhere. Looking beyond 5G, the NGMN has identified use cases for 6G to help to steer the needs and requirements for future generational change, More details in its new white paper and at its press conference next week. And finally, Telefonica promises to provide an enhanced and expanded digital twin of its MWC22 show floor presence by extending its demos into the metaverse to enable those not attending in person to experience the telco's various innovation showcases. One of which has particular appeal to me, the 5G bartender. And I hope, Ray, that you'll be able to get hands-on with that.
Well, I'm not sure I really need greater throughput when it comes to barroom activities, but if I must, I'm prepared to find out what that's all about, Guy.
It's a tough job. Someone's got to do it. Now, this week, we're also looking into some of the key technologies that will be prominent at MWC, as identified in our SCOPE acronym, which stands for Security, Cloud, Open RAN, Private Networks, and Energy Efficiency. Early this week, we looked at Open RAN and security, and today we're going to cover cloud and also take a look at enterprise 5G, which isn't the E in scope, but hey, we're going to talk about it anyway. So, starting with the cloud, big area of interest here, and we have a dedicated panel discussion on this as part of our Strategy Outlook series, which you can view next week. Ray, what are the current issues around telcos and the cloud?
Thanks, Guy. Well, there are two key areas, I would say. One is the ongoing development of the telco cloud, which in the 5G context is very closely tied to virtual RAN and Open RAN. The distributed cloud architecture needed to support vRAN and Open RAN is becoming more evident. And indeed, this week we've heard how KDDI, one of the major operators in arguably the world's most important single market in terms of mobile network tech innovation, Japan, is working with Wind River to manage its 5G standalone O-RAN compliant virtualized base stations. Now, while there are still only a few operators with such advanced mobile network architectures, this will become the norm in years to come and will ultimately lead to the creation of broader, multi-purpose cloud-native edge platforms. We're still at the beginning of this cycle. Now, the second aspect is the relationship between the telcos and the public cloud giants. And it's a relationship that is getting stronger for sure, but also increasingly complex. And there's no sign that the telco community is ready to migrate its full suite of functionality over to AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and others. There will be a lot of eyes on Dish Network in the US when it launches its 5G service to see how that goes, because that service will be relying entirely on AWS as the enabling platform. Never a dull moment in the cloud, Guy.
Never a dull moment. So that's the cloud. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a dedicated panel session on this next week. Let's move on to 5G for the enterprise, the great hope for new 5G revenue streams.
Well, yes, indeed. And Singtel, with the Paragon pitch that you mentioned earlier, is a classic example of where every telco has to go, it seems, to get a return on investment in 5G. If enterprise revenues don't grow, where is the ROI? There's no sign of riches from the consumer segment, quite the opposite right now for mobile operators. And still what I sense is that the mobile operators believe they are the linchpins in the communication services relationships with enterprises, that they hold all the cards and just need to get to know the needs and demands of the various verticals better to make the big breakthrough that they need. I think they're in for a big shock if that's the case. It's just not that simple. Of course, the growing niche of private 5G networks is a classic example here, but we'll be focusing on that particular development later in the week.
Yes, and we'll certainly be watching out for news announcements in those two areas. Ray, thank you very much. Now, as well as reporting on the news, we have a whole week of special Spotlight on 5G programs for you, and you can watch them on demand or via the playlist on TelecomTV, which will be running pretty much all day, Monday through Thursday. Strategy Outlook returns with focused discussions on the 5G core, RAN, edge and private networks, and the cloud. Plus, we'll have related interviews from CSP executives and key vendor partners. And backed by popular demand is our Top 10 Mobile Moments series, where Ray and I look back at TelecomTV's 20 years of coverage of MWC. We serve up a fresh edition of The Slice every day of the show with all the important news and analysis from the TelecomTV team. And then the following week, when we're all safely back at our desks, it's time for the after show, our live Q&A program. So please start sending in your questions now. Before we end today's show, and by way of a preview of what's coming up on Spotlight on 5G, here's a sample of some of the interviews and discussions we have in store.
So simplification, number one. Number two is OPEX reduction. Obviously, this is about cutting costs, and cutting costs requires automation to the extreme. No matter what you do, you just need to get things out of it. You need to get costs out. You need to be able to reduce the involvement of human beings in the process. You need to give as much self-service to the customers. And last but not least, it's about risk elimination. As I was saying, it's a very complex environment. And because it's complicated, there's also a certain risk related to it. And so you want to be able to push as much risk to the network functions itself to make sure that they identify and resolve problems even before they pick up.
Lots of transformation happening in LAN, networking, and security. And I think, the key here is when you think about those elements, a lot of it right now is kind of separate policy management, visibility, orchestration. So when I think about the opportunity, it's really the convergence of the technologies across those different aspects. So convergence of orchestrators into a master orchestrator, convergence of the policies that I'm managing across networking, LAN, and into my cloud security. So if you can converge a lot of those and integrate them, I think that creates, one, a lot of value for the enterprise business, and two, from a managed service provider, it simplifies in how we're proactively managing and monitoring a lot of these different technology continuums.
So what we do is provide that binding glue that allows all of the different software to run. And then we also abstract the hardware, which is Dell here. And one of the new things that we did in this work with NTT Docomo as part of the OREC is a new accelerator. So far, we had been working on different accelerators from NVIDIA and from Intel. This time now we're working with the Xilinx accelerator. So also for us, there was some new learning here to bring and then provide that capability as part of that particular platform. Now, Red Hat platform is completely open, which is in line with the vision and the goal that NTT Docomo had, which is to create an open platform with different components from different vendors and bring that all together. And that's really what they're trying to advance, and that's part of the fundamentals of Open RAN ecosystem.
That's all for today's edition of The Slice. Please join Ray and me again on Friday for our final MWC preview show. Until then, thank you for watching and goodbye.